Hey gang, Joyce with Skippy Calves Farms here. I'm doing a follow-up on a follow-up on a follow-up on processing walnuts because quite frankly it's something I'm learning, and I'm learning as I go, and I'm following other people's leads and examples and techniques and seeing how they work with what I have, because my equipment's different, my nuts are different. And in some cases my needs are different. So one of the things I've recently confirmed, and that is you don't want to go ahead and crack and try and store the nut meat once the shell's been broken. Once you've got your nuts broken like this or better, you want to eat the nut meat, because even in the freezer it's not going to stay as good. Now, you heard me talking about the young man's videos that I followed, and it is an awesome technique for me for getting the holes off of the hard round shell itself. The floating technique for getting the nut meat out and just kind of sort of cracking the nut and then doing the floating technique, that did not work for me. Why? Because my walnuts vary in character. Some of them are really hard, some of them are pretty soft, and so I have to pay attention when I'm cracking them. And if I cracked them all so that they would break up into little pieces like this here from a full shell, I'd end up crushing the majority of my nut meat, and so I wouldn't end up with any nice pieces. I'd end up with everything that's this size or smaller. And as I processed it, found one that is empty. I thought I'd gotten them all out. So as I processed with my nuts, with my equipment, and kind of my goals in mind, my expectations, and my focus kind of changed. Here's another one that's empty. So for me, because I wasn't able to get these shells super duper clean, I just did not have much real, and I've got, look at that, that's a lot of shell on there. So I did not have real good success with the floating technique. Now I'm going to go over, this tray was originally 2 trays, and it was 2 trays with shells that had meat in them. I went through and moved them around gently, and ended up with 1 tray left with shells with nut meat. Now some of them are still only a small piece of nut meat, and he said in his video, if it's a small piece, he was just getting rid of it. Well, it takes a bit of time when you're working with walnuts, and I'm looking to categorize some of my work based on how much energy am I putting in and how much energy am I getting out. I don't want my gardening and my farming to be energy negative from a personal energy standpoint. So as I was moving the second tray over here, it was originally in here, and this is the extra nut meat that I found. Now this one piece came out of a big piece that I saw that kind of looked like this. Could have been this. No, that was a big piece like this that I was able to crack with my fingers. It had a crack in the piece. I was able to separate that with my fingers and get this big piece out. Otherwise, you can see all of the other nut meat pieces that came out of those as a result of moving them around are very small pieces. They're the little pieces like this, the little finger end pieces, the little pieces that are the little bump on the end that get stuck and you can't get it out, and the rest of the piece of nut meat breaks off in your hands, and so you end up with a piece like that that's stuck between a septum or at the end of a piece. Anyway, I know I get too technical. So I got that much more nut meat from the one tray, so I combined those two trays into one. So this is the nut meat from one that I followed up on, and this is the nut meat from the first tray that I had gone back and done all of the floating technique. Oh, looks like I got a piece of shell here. The floating technique that he recommended. Yeah, I got a little bit more, but I've also got shells in there. Last thing I want to do is to break a tooth on a piece of shell from a walnut. And as I was working with them, I realized, having watched some other videos, that there are other ways of processing it where you end up with a lot more pieces like this. Now understand also, I've got a Grandpa's Goody Getter. You can go into my other videos and look. And so what I really want are pieces like this, and pieces like this. I really don't want to have to deal with a bunch of small pieces. I'm not going to be doing baking. I'm allergic to gluten, so and I live in a little tiny camper. I don't have an oven. I have a hot plate. So baked goods are not, homemade baked goods are not coming out of my kitchen. Whoops, there's another one. So I decided that the float method was kind of frustrating for me, and I really didn't like it. Let me put you on hold for here just a minute. Let me get this pair of pruning shears out from under there. Okay, gang. Now, what are you looking at now? Well, you're looking at basically work that I did over the course of a day plus. This first tray is from the previous day, where I used the floating method and where I had actually gone with the nutcracker. I had gone and focused on getting bigger pieces and then just putting them in and using the float. So I left a lot of big pieces like this, and didn't try and get them any smaller. I ended up with a good size, well, with this bowl almost full of these kinds of shells. When I started the second day, I decided I didn't want to do that. I had watched a couple of other videos from some more country type folk. And time wasn't of the essence. What they wanted to do was they wanted to get as much meat per shell as they could and get it as quickly as they could, because walnuts, you know, you harvest them late in the fall. If you're going to sell them to market, you got to get them to market before Thanksgiving. So if you're going to do that, and you're going to do that by hand, you've got to be fairly efficient, but you've got to produce larger pieces of meat. So this tray here was the first tray that I did from the second day. I was still putting a number of pieces aside to be picked later. Then I started trying to get more meat per shell. And you can kind of see that as I go along. These three trays here, there's quite a few big pieces, and there's some smaller pieces as well. Now on this last tray is what I did yesterday. What I did yesterday that was different from before was I had a pair of Nippers fence cutters. When I had first started, I had a pair of what they call nut snips. Let me put you on hold for a moment. Let me get those. Okay, gang, I'm back. So these are the nut snippers that I'd actually gotten from Grandpa's Goody Getter. And as you can see, that whole blade broke off. And that broke off about maybe 30 or 40% of the way into the first day's work. It wasn't far. And then, so the next 2 days I worked with trying to use the Goody Getter itself, that little hoof pick that I had, the needle nose pliers that I had, and you can see trying to work with the Grandpa's Goody Getter and those tools, I was able to get quite a few walnut quarters, but there's still quite a bit of broken up pieces as well. This last tray, you can see it's almost all quarter pieces or better. I had a number of pieces that were halves that kind of fell apart after they've been moved around, but there's a half that there's another half there, but you can see there's a lot of big pieces in this tray compared to trying to do the same thing without the Nipex. A lot of those pieces got broken into half. What would have been a quarter got broken into, an eighth or a piece. So what's my point? My point is the decision's yours. For me, it was a lot less frustrating for me to stand at the Goody Getter, the big yellow nutcracker, pay attention to what was going on. I used my fingers around the nut and felt carefully and moved it, and I would go back and forth with the lever a number of times. And then what I was doing was, if I did end up with a part that was a bit bigger, maybe twice the size of these pieces, I would use and hold this up in the Goody Getter and let the Goody Getter split it down the middle. So I didn't end up with big pieces anymore. What was the game changer were these Nipex, which are expensive fence cutting tool. They're German made, but if I can do this with one hand, with the Nipex, I could go in and cut, like you can see here, I'm cutting on this side of the well, I'm not going to be able to do that because everything's sitting on stuff and sliding, but as you can see, this thing will open up pretty wide, and so it would allow me to come in and, as an example, cut here at this end away from the meat, and then that piece would come out whole. That piece would come out whole. I couldn't do that with the other tools. And so for me, it was about the same time frame because the setup was so much easier. I didn't have to deal with water and hoses and bowls and things. I was able to just set it up with the Goody Getter. I could stand here at the table and just get a rhythm to it. And I paid attention to the shell and the design on the shell. and I started cutting along the septum and along with the shell geometry on each individual piece. And it was amazing how much more I could get. And you can actually kind of see a difference in the color. This tray over here looks darker than this tray or even this tray, and it's just because there's less white meat exposed. Those pieces came out whole from inside the shell, or a whole quarter. So that, gang, is how I'm going to follow up on it. I'm going to put these trays into my dehydrator, let them sit in a dehydrator for a couple of hours to get them. I just rinse them off. Rinse them off using just a simple screen and a bowl and a garden hose, because I don't have normal plumbing. I don't have any indoor plumbing at all. I just have garden hoses to work with. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to go with the dry method. But I wanted to rinse everything clean because my nuts were pretty dirty, you can see. I didn't use a pressure washer. So I wanted to make sure I got my nuts clean. So I floated them, I rinsed them. I got them in these trays. I'm going to put them in the trays for a couple of hours just to get them dried a little bit. And I think I ended up with about 30 bags. I processed, I think, about 9. So I'm hoping to get at least a quart of nuts. I should have at least a quart of nuts here, I think. And going forward, I'm just going to process what I'm going to eat, because I like eating nuts as nuts, not just necessarily in baked goods. If I leave them inside the shell, I'll be able... it's cloudy out here today, but it's still warm. We're expecting snow in a couple of days. I'm standing out here in my shirt sleeves. But if you leave them hanging in the bag, which is what I've got in the semi, here, let me put you on hold and let me show you. Okay, here we are inside the semi. Here's the Grandpa Goody Getter. Okay, and sometimes what I would do, if you pay attention, this cam on the bottom has a flat edge. This cam on the top, it's a much narrower edge, and it has a sharp ridge around the top, so you can kind of cut a top hat off of it. So what I found worked pretty good for me was having the dirty side down, and that meant that I got a good clean cap cut off the top of the walnut, and I could just peel the sides off. But this is how I've got them hanging. I just put a screw into a 2x4 that I had put up on the side of the semi, and these have been hanging like this for 3 weeks. If you want to go back and look at how I have them tied off, I've not had any of them come loose. None of them. The only problem I had was early on, I was trying to pull one arm tight with a pair of pliers, and the pair of pliers cut the hole right there. After that, when I was pulling it tight, I was squeezing it here with my fingers and working it back and forth until I got at least one of those little hooky-doo things to the outside. Having that knot at the base like that tends to spread the bottom apart and holds it in place. And having it in a cord, and having that cord hook over that little upright that's on the bottom of that hook, I was able to take it apart, not tear anything, and the bags are still totally intact. I'll be able to use them multiple times. So what I'll just do going forward, I can set it up to work on this here, although the lighting's not very good, or just take this and put it out on the table like I have recently. But so I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 bags that are missing off my hooks. So and I've got some more along the side. So I think I did a total of 30, 32, I think. 28 to 32. So with that, gang, these are going to keep hanging until I'm ready to use them. They should be good to go for at least 2 years. This is a insulated semi, and I've got a dehumidifier in here, so they should not mold or mildew. With that, gang, I will wish you blessings for the day, and whatever you do, just keep chasing the dream.